At 2 a.m., rain drags its fingers down the trauma room windows, and the monitors go silent. For a surgeon, silence is not peace. It is accusation. It is the room asking one question with no mercy: are you still in command when the pulse disappears? The scalpel rests near his gloved hand, small, clean, almost weightless. But in that moment, it feels heavier than pride, heavier than reputation, heavier than every successful operation that ever taught him to trust himself. His ego wants to panic. Not loudly. Not visibly. Just enough to make his hand move too fast, his mind jump too far, his fear of failure pretend to be urgency. This is where Fudoshin begins. Not in comfort. Not after the storm. But inside the second when chaos enters the room and tries to take the throne. The trauma room does not care about his resume. It does not care how many years he spent in residency, how many nights he stayed awake with textbooks open under cheap apartment light, how many times he walked into a room and brought someone back from the edge. At 2 a.m., with rain tapping against the glass and the monitors falling into that terrible stillness, the past offers no rescue. Only the next breath does. The surgeon stands under fluorescent light that makes every face look pale, every instrument look colder than it is. Nurses shift around the table. Someone waits for his order. Someone else watches the screen, as if staring hard enough can force rhythm back into the line. The air holds the smell of disinfectant and wet fabric from coats abandoned near the door. Outside, the rain keeps striking the window like fingers demanding entry. And near his hand, the scalpel remains exactly where it was. That is the cruelty of high stakes. The smallest object becomes enormous. A clean blade. A metal tray. A gloved thumb pressed too hard against the palm. None of it moves until the mind chooses what kind of man is standing there. His first enemy is not the flatline. His first enemy is the private voice that says, not this patient, not in my room, not under my hands. That voice sounds noble at first. It sounds like responsibility. It sounds like urgency. But underneath it, something more dangerous is moving. Ego's fear of failure. The need to prove that he is still the surgeon everyone believes him to be. The need to defeat the moment instead of serve it. That is where a skilled person can become unsafe inside his own mind. Pressure does not always make people careless because they do not care. Sometimes it makes them careless because they care too much about the wrong thing. They begin defending an image of themselves. They start fighting the humiliation of being unable to control the outcome. Their hands move, but their attention splits. Part of them is with the patient. Part of them is already imagining the hallway afterward, the questions, the forms, the faces, the silence from the family, the quiet accusation of their own memory. A body can stand in the trauma room while the mind runs into the future. This is how command breaks. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It breaks in half seconds. The breath shortens. The jaw locks. The eyes scan too widely and see nothing clearly. The voice gets sharp in a way that feels like authority but is really fear wearing a white coat. The hand reaches before the mind has returned. The next step becomes contaminated by the terror of the final result. And in high-stakes work, a contaminated mind is a second emergency. Fudoshin is often misunderstood as being unshaken because nothing is felt. That is childish. A surgeon in a trauma room is not stone. He hears the silence. He feels the pressure of time. He knows the weight of the patient on the table and the people waiting outside who have no idea what is happening behind these doors. He knows that every second has a cost. Fudoshin does not erase that. It gives it rank. Fear may enter. Ego may speak. The old hunger to be perfect may rise in the chest. But none of them are allowed to command the room. The room needs a surgeon, not a man trying to protect his pride. There is a difference. The man protecting his pride takes the flatline personally. He hears it as insult. He feels the monitors go silent and something in him wants to answer with force, speed, dominance. He wants to outrun the shame before it arrives. He wants to become bigger than the moment so he does not have to feel small inside it. The surgeon under command does something harder. He becomes smaller on purpose. He narrows the world to sequence. Breath. Eyes. Team. Patient. Next right action. His identity is no longer the heroic doctor. It is the disciplined center of the room. He does not need to look fearless. He does not need the room to believe in him. He needs the room to function. There is a nurse across from him whose eyes flick toward his face, looking for the emotional weather. This is one of the unseen burdens of leadership. People do not only hear your words. They borrow your nervous system. If your voice cracks into panic, panic spreads. If your ego fills the room, everyone has to work around it. But if your presence becomes steady, Even for 3 seconds, the room can organize itself around that steadiness. That is not performance. That is duty. The surgeon's hand hovers near the scalpel, but he does not grab it like a weapon. The scalpel is not proof of his power. It is a tool. A tool requires a hand, and a hand requires a mind. If the mind is ruled by fear, even a precise instrument becomes part of the chaos. So he pauses for the smallest beat. Not enough for anyone to call hesitation. Not enough to abandon urgency. Just enough to stop the ego from choosing the next move. In that beat, everything tries to enter him at once. The rain. The silent monitors. The eyes of the team. The memory of other nights. The fear that this one will follow him home. The selfish wish that the outcome could protect his name. The deeper wish that the patient could simply live. He feels all of it. Then he lowers his breath. This is the confrontation most people never see. They imagine discipline as the visible act, the order given, the decision made, the clean movement of trained hands. But the real confrontation happens before that. It is internal. It is the moment a person refuses to let the loudest emotion become the highest authority. A weaker version of him would confuse speed with command. He would speak too sharply, move too quickly, blame the room, blame the equipment, blame the impossible hour. He would make everyone feel his fear while pretending it was intensity. And because he was technically skilled, he might still look impressive from the outside. That is the danger. A person can look decisive while being ruled by panic. A person can sound powerful while being controlled by shame. A person can keep moving and still be running away. Fudoshin cuts through that lie. In this trauma room, calm is not softness. Calm is the discipline that keeps perception clean. It lets him see who is where. It lets him hear the change in someone's voice. It lets him separate what is urgent from what is merely loud inside his own chest. Calm does not slow him down. It removes the wasted motion that fear creates. The flatline has already taken enough. It does not get to take his mind too. He looks at the team, and his voice comes out lower than his fear wants it to. Not cold. Not theatrical. Just clear. The kind of clear that gives other people something solid to stand on. He assigns attention. He brings the room back into order. He does not pretend the situation is fine. He refuses to let it become formless. The ego hates this because ego wants a story. It wants to be the savior or the failure, the genius or the ruined man. It wants the moment to be about identity. But high stakes punish identity. They reward service. The patient does not need his self-image. The team does not need his inner courtroom. The room does not need a surgeon who is busy arguing with his own fear. It needs the trained part of him to step forward and take command over the frightened part of him. That is the first victory. Not the outcome. Not yet. The first victory is that he does not abandon himself. He does not disappear into panic. He does not inflate into ego. He does not become cruel to the people around him just because terror is pressing against his ribs. He stays inside the room. Fully. Specifically. With the rain still striking the glass, with the monitors still accusing the silence, with the scalpel still waiting beside his hand. And that is the hard truth of Fudoshin. The unmovable mind is not a mind untouched by fear. It is a mind that has trained long enough to feel fear arrive and still choose the order of duty. In the trauma room, that order begins with one breath. Then one decision. Then one precise command. Discipline does not begin after you feel calm. It begins in the first second you realize you are about to lose command. For the surgeon, that second is almost invisible. It is not a dramatic pause. It is not the kind of silence a camera would notice. It is the thin space between the flat line and his next order, between ego's fear of failure and the duty that stands beneath it. Rain keeps tapping the windows. The monitors remain quiet in that awful way, as if the room has lost its heartbeat and is waiting to borrow his. This is the training. Not the ceremony. Not the title. Not the respect people give him in daylight. The training is what remains at 2 a.m. when the body wants to rush and the ego wants to be saved. First, he stops the first reaction. Not the work. The reaction. There is a difference. The work must continue. The patient needs movement, coordination, skill, timing. But the first emotional surge does not deserve the right to drive. So he catches it before it becomes his voice. He feels the heat rising behind the mask. He feels the sharp sentence forming on his tongue, the one that would sound like leadership but would only spread his fear across the room. He does not say it. That is an action. A real one. He lets the first breath pass through the mask. He names the shadow without announcing it to anyone. Fear of failure. Not truth. Not prophecy. Just fear. A message from the nervous system. A storm in the body. Weather, not command. Then he brings his eyes back to the room. Not to the imagined hallway afterward. Not to the future conversation. Not to the story where he becomes either hero or failure. He looks at the patient. He looks at the team. He looks at the instruments. He lets the trauma room become specific again. Second, he anchors the body. The scalpel is still beside his hand. Clean steel under hard light. Earlier, it felt like the symbol of his skill, almost a quiet witness to his identity. Now it becomes something humbler. A reminder that precision does not come from wanting control. Precision comes from returning to what is real. He does not grip it to feel powerful. He lets his gloved fingers rest near it. The edge of the handle. The pressure of latex against skin. The cold tray beneath it. A small point of contact in a room trying to become infinite. This is how Fudoshin enters the body. Not as a speech. As contact. Feet on the floor. Shoulders low. Eyes steady. Breath pulled down out of the throat and back into the chest. He does not need to feel peaceful. He needs to be usable. He needs his hands to belong to duty instead of fear. A disciplined person learns this: when the mind runs too far ahead, bring it back through the body. The floor is here. The scalpel is here. The team is here. The next action is here. Third, he shrinks the battle. Ego wants the whole war at once. It wants the final outcome now. It wants certainty, reassurance, proof that this night will not become the memory that wakes him years later. But a trauma room does not give that kind of mercy. It gives seconds. It gives sequence. It gives only the next correct piece. So he refuses the impossible demand to control the entire ending. He chooses the next command. One clear sentence. One task assigned to one person. One check of the room's rhythm. One correction without blame. One confirmation heard out loud. Not because these things guarantee anything. They do not. Life is not that obedient. But they keep the room from dissolving into emotional noise. This is where many people misunderstand discipline. They think it means becoming certain. In reality, discipline often means acting cleanly while certainty is unavailable. The surgeon cannot command the outcome. He can command the quality of his presence. He can command the order of his words. He can command whether his ego becomes another emergency. Fourth, he protects the room from his shadow. Every leader leaks something under pressure. Some leak anger. Some leak panic. Some leak contempt. Some leak a desperate need to prove they belong in charge. In a trauma room, those leaks become costly. They make people hesitate. They make people hide information. They turn a team into separate bodies instead of one disciplined instrument. So he makes his voice lower. Not softer in a weak way. Lower as in grounded. Measured. Direct. He gives the room something it can use. He does not shame the nurse whose hands are moving fast. He does not snap at the person watching the monitor. He does not decorate the moment with frustration. Each word has to carry weight, not heat. The rain outside can be chaotic. His voice cannot be. That is an act of restraint, and restraint is not passivity. Restraint is strength that has accepted a chain of command. It is the refusal to make other people pay for the storm inside your chest. Fifth, he turns the next motion into ritual. This is not ritual like incense or old robes or some borrowed image from another century. This is modern ritual. Practical ritual. The kind built from repetition, training, and respect for the moment. Look. Breathe. Name the fear. Touch the anchor. Give the next clear order. Return to the room. Again. The mind will drift toward the ending. Bring it back. The ego will demand protection. Bring it back. The fear will try to become urgency. Bring it back. The silence of the monitors will feel personal. Bring it back. Every return is a rep. Every breath is a cut against panic. Every clear instruction is the scalpel being used inwardly before it is ever used by the hand. This is the shugyo inside Fudoshin, hardship made precise. The training is not to feel nothing. The training is to stop obeying everything you feel. The training is to let fear speak without giving it the chair at the head of the table. And in that trauma room, the surgeon begins to understand something that no diploma can teach. His gift is not only in his hands. It is in the space before his hands move. That space decides whether skill will serve the patient or serve the ego. That space decides whether the room will receive leadership or pressure disguised as leadership. That space decides whether fear becomes information or command. The scalpel waits beside him. No longer heavy with reputation. No longer a symbol of who he must prove himself to be. Just a tool. And because it is just a tool, his hand can become a tool too. His voice can become a tool. His breath can become a tool. His attention can become the one steady thing in a room where everything else is asking to break. At 2 a.m., with rain against the glass and silence pressing from the monitors, the practice is brutally simple. Do not worship the fear. Do not fight the ego in public. Do not try to win the whole night in 1 second. Return to the next right action. Then return again. The room does not become peaceful. That is the first thing to understand. The rain is still there, dragging silver lines down the dark windows. The fluorescent lights still flatten every face into focus. The monitors still hold their silence like a verdict waiting to be written. The trauma room is not suddenly transformed into a place of confidence. No music rises. No certainty enters through the door. But the surgeon is no longer asking the room to make him feel certain. That is the change. A minute ago, the flatline had reached for his identity. It had tried to pull him into the oldest trap of high-stakes work. Make the outcome a judgment on your worth. Make the patient's body a courtroom. Make every second a witness. Make the silence say your name. Now he refuses the trial. He is still afraid. He still knows what is at stake. He still understands that the next decision matters in a way ordinary decisions do not. But fear has lost its promotion. It is no longer the chief of the room. His voice has changed first. Not louder. Cleaner. He gives one order, then listens for confirmation. He looks directly at the person he is speaking to. He does not spray urgency across the team like broken glass. He places it where it belongs, into sequence, into timing, into the next necessary action. The team feels it. A trauma room can sense when the center returns. Shoulders adjust. Hands become more exact. People stop looking for emotional permission and begin doing what they were trained to do. The room is still moving quickly, but now the speed has shape. It is no longer panic with medical language around it. It is coordinated pressure. That is what Fudoshin does. It gives chaos a spine. The surgeon's hand moves near the scalpel again. Earlier, the scalpel had felt heavy with ego. It had carried the hidden demand to be perfect, to be heroic, to prove that his skill could conquer the night. It was no longer just steel. It was reputation. It was pride. It was the story he wanted to tell himself about who he was under pressure. Now, under the same light, on the same metal tray, the scalpel is only a scalpel. That sounds small. It is not. To see the tool clearly, without projecting fear onto it, is a form of freedom. The blade does not ask him to be a legend. It asks him to be precise. It asks for one clean movement at the right time, guided by training, not panic. It asks him to serve the situation as it is, not the ego's desperate version of it. The surgeon understands this with his whole body. His jaw loosens just enough. His breathing lowers. His eyes stop chasing every possible ending and return to the field in front of him. He notices what matters. He dismisses what does not. He lets the room become narrow, not because his mind is small, but because his attention is disciplined. There is power in that narrowing. Most people lose themselves because they try to hold the entire storm at once. They try to solve the future while standing in the present. They try to protect their image, defend their past, predict the outcome, manage everyone's emotions, and still perform the task in front of them. No mind can carry all of that cleanly. So the disciplined mind cuts. Not into the patient. Into the noise. It cuts away the imagined hallway. It cuts away the fear of being blamed. It cuts away the fantasy of being the savior. It cuts away the private courtroom where ego keeps demanding a verdict. What remains is duty. Not glamorous duty. Not heroic duty. Just the plain, severe responsibility of being fully available to the next right action. The room still has edges. The clock still moves. The rain still taps against the glass like the world outside has no idea what is being fought inside these walls. But the surgeon has stopped treating the storm as a personal insult. He has stopped trying to defeat the silence with force. He is working with command now. And command is quieter than fear expects. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to dominate every voice. It does not need to turn the surgeon into a statue. He can feel the pressure and remain useful. He can feel the fear of failure and refuse to make it the operating principle of his hands. This is the transformation. Not that he becomes unshakable because nothing can hurt him. That is fantasy. He becomes unshakable because he stops negotiating with the part of him that wants to turn pain into panic. He stops letting ego pretend it is responsibility. He stops letting reputation stand between him and the person on the table. For one severe moment, his life becomes simple. Serve the patient. Steady the room. Take the next correct step. Everything else can wait outside in the rain. There is a kind of humility in this that only pressure can teach. The surgeon cannot order life to obey him. He cannot force every ending to protect his name. He cannot make skill larger than reality. But he can refuse to become careless because he is scared. He can refuse to punish his team with his tension. He can refuse to confuse emotional intensity with moral seriousness. That refusal is not passive. It is a blade turned inward. The monitors remain silent, and still he does not become the silence. The room remains urgent, and still he does not become urgency. The night remains heavy, and still he does not let the night enter his hands. This is modern samurai discipline in its clearest form. No armor. No ceremony. No ancient battlefield. Just a man in a trauma room at 2 a.m., standing between fear and duty, deciding which one gets to use his body. And now the scalpel means something different. At the beginning, it was the weight of performance. In the middle, it became an anchor back to the present. Now, it is a reminder of rightful proportion. A scalpel is powerful only because it is controlled. Its value comes from restraint, from angle, from timing, from the refusal to waste motion. The same is true of the mind. A mind without restraint cuts wildly through the people around it. A mind under command becomes useful. The surgeon does not need to win the moment with emotion. He needs to meet it with form. So he stands there, rain behind him, silent monitors before him, team around him, scalpel near his hand, and something in him settles into its proper place. Fear is present. Ego is present. But neither sits on the throne. The throne belongs to duty. And under that duty, his movements become clean again. His words become useful again. His attention stops begging the future for mercy and returns to the only place where discipline can act. Here. This room. This second. This command. The outside world may still be chaos, but the inner room has found its order. A surgeon's Fudoshin moment is not the moment he knows the ending. It is the moment he becomes worthy of the next action without needing the ending to comfort him. You may never stand in a trauma room at 2 a.m. with rain on the windows and silent monitors in front of you. But you will have your own flatline moment. A phone call that changes the room. A meeting where your voice wants to shake. A family crisis where everyone looks to you. A failure that threatens to become your identity. In those moments, the world will not ask if you feel ready. It will ask who is in command. Remember the scalpel. Not as a weapon. Not as proof. As a reminder that power without restraint becomes damage, but power under discipline becomes service. So when fear rises, do not worship it. When ego speaks, do not hand it the room. Breathe. Return. Choose the next clean action. If this spoke to you, stay with this path. Fear can speak, but it does not get to command.